Your tooth is throbbing right now. Not literally, hopefully, but you know the feeling, that deep, pulsing ache that makes it impossible to think about anything else, that turns eating into a negotiation and sleeping into a battle. You reach for ibuprofen. You book an appointment. You get numbed with a needle before anyone touches your mouth. Simple, modern, expected. But the real answer to how humans dealt with this exact pain for most of history is far stranger than a trip to the dentist. Because dental pain is not new, it is ancient. It is older than agriculture, older than writing, older than the wheel. Every human who has ever lived with teeth has at some point felt one of them betray them, and for roughly 99% of human history, there was no anesthesia, no numbing gel, no nerve block, no general anesthetic drifting you off into a dreamless nothing while a drill did its work. Just pain, and whatever your ancestors could figure out to fight it. So what did they actually do? The answer involves beeswax, drilled molars, imaginary worms, and a level of surgical nerve that should honestly terrify you. Start with the obvious question. Why do teeth hurt so much in the first place? Your tooth looks solid. It looks like bone, like a little white rock sitting in your jaw. But underneath the hard enamel shell is a soft core called the pulp, packed with nerves and blood vessels. When decay eats through the enamel, or a tooth cracks, that pulp gets exposed or inflamed, and it sends a signal to your brain that is, frankly, disproportionate to almost anything else the body produces. Toothache pain ranks among the most intense pain a human being can experience while still walking around functioning. Ancient humans did not know about nerve endings or bacterial decay. They only knew the feeling was unbearable, and unbearable pain demands a response. The earliest hard evidence of humans actively treating dental problems comes from a site called Mehrgarh in what is now Pakistan. In 2006, a team led by paleoanthropologist Roberto Macchiarelli published findings in the journal Nature describing something remarkable. 9 adult molars, dated to between roughly 7,500 and 9,000 years ago, showed small, precise, cone-shaped holes drilled directly into the biting surface. Not cavities, not accidents. Drilled. Using what looked like a bow drill, the same tool used at the time to work beads and shells, someone was boring into human teeth on purpose. Why would anyone do that? The leading theory is exactly what you think. It was an attempt to relieve the pressure and pain of an infected or decaying tooth, thousands of years before anyone had a word for a dentist. Now, drilling a hole into a screaming nerve does not exactly sound like relief, and it probably wasn't pleasant. But think about what it represents. Someone, watching another person in agony, figured out that releasing pressure from inside a tooth could ease the pain. That is not guesswork. That is applied anatomical reasoning, performed on living human beings with Stone Age tools, thousands of years before germ theory existed. Question is, once you have drilled the hole, what do you do with it? That question has an answer too, and it comes from a different site entirely. In 2012, a research team led by Federico Bernardini and Claudio Tunis examined a 6,500-year-old human mandible discovered in Slovenia decades earlier, sitting quietly in a museum collection. Using synchrotron radiation and infrared spectroscopy, tools no ancient dentist could have imagined, they confirmed something extraordinary. A cracked canine tooth had been filled. Packed inside the crack was beeswax, applied while the wax was still warm and workable, sealing the exposed area. Published in the journal PLOS One, this remains the oldest known example of dental filling in human history. Beeswax. The same substance your ancestors used for candles and waterproofing was also, apparently, an emergency dental sealant. It would not have stopped an infection. It would not have regrown the tooth. But it likely reduced sensitivity to hot, cold, and pressure, buying someone real relief from a cracked tooth that otherwise had no cure at all. So drilling existed. Filling existed. But what about the pain itself, in the moment, before or instead of any procedure? This is where ancient medicine gets genuinely inventive. Across nearly every early civilization with written records, you find remedies aimed directly at tooth pain. The Ebers Papyrus, an Egyptian medical text dating to around 1550 BCE, lists treatments involving pastes made from herbs, minerals, and even mouse dung packed against an aching tooth. Strange, yes. But some of the plant-based ingredients in Egyptian dental remedies did contain genuine anti-inflammatory compounds. It wasn't purely superstition. It was trial and error passed down through generations, mixed with whatever spiritual explanation made sense at the time. And ancient people absolutely had a spiritual explanation. For thousands of years, across cultures with no contact with one another, the dominant theory of tooth pain was the tooth worm. Sumerian texts from nearly 5,000 years ago describe a worm burrowing inside teeth, causing decay and agony. The idea spread and persisted. It appears in ancient Chinese medical writing. It appears in medieval European folk remedies. It survived in some rural traditions into the 19th century. Why would such a specific wrong idea last for 5,000 years across completely disconnected civilizations? Because decayed teeth, under a microscope of the naked eye, genuinely look like something has bored a tunnel through them. The explanation was wrong, but the observation behind it was sharp. Ancient people were pattern matching real physical evidence. They just didn't have bacteria in their vocabulary yet. If a worm was the enemy, ancient treatments followed the logic. Smoke was used to try to drive it out. Certain seeds were burned near the mouth, the smoke directed at the aching tooth, in the belief that it would kill or expel the parasite. It did nothing to any actual worm because there was none, but heat and certain plant compounds released in smoke may have offered a small numbing effect, enough to feel like something was working. Then there is the plant that actually did work, and still does: clove. The dried flower bud of the clove tree contains a compound called eugenol, a natural anesthetic and antiseptic. Ancient Chinese medical texts from over 2,000 years ago recommend chewing cloves for tooth pain and bad breath. This was not folklore that happened to be harmless. Eugenol genuinely numbs the area it touches and has mild antibacterial properties. Dentists used clove oil as a standard numbing agent well into the 20th century, right up until synthetic local anesthetics became widespread. Somewhere in ancient China, someone chewed on a dried flower bud during a toothache, felt the ache dull, and passed that knowledge on for 2,000 years before modern chemistry ever explained why it worked. Willow bark tells a similar story. Ancient Sumerian and Egyptian texts describe chewing willow bark or brewing it into a bitter tea for pain relief, including dental pain. The active compound is salicin, which your body converts into salicylic acid, the same family of chemical that eventually became aspirin in the late 19th century. So the throbbing molar that sends you reaching for a painkiller today is connected, through an unbroken chemical thread, to someone in the ancient Near East chewing on tree bark because it happened to help. Nobody understood the biochemistry. Everybody understood the result. Extraction was the last resort, and it was brutal. Archaeological remains show ancient humans using sharpened stone tools, and later bronze and iron instruments, to physically remove badly decayed teeth. There was no anesthesia for this beyond whatever herbs, alcohol, or sheer willpower a person could manage. Roman medical writers describe extraction tools resembling forceps, used by practitioners who understood enough anatomy to grip and rock a tooth free rather than simply yanking it. It worked, in the sense that it ended the source of pain permanently. It also meant that surviving to old age with a full set of functional teeth was, for most of human history, genuinely rare. Here is the counterintuitive part. You might assume that without modern anesthesia, ancient dental care was crude, ignorant, and essentially useless. It wasn't. The Mehrgarh drilling shows anatomical reasoning. The Slovenian filling shows material science applied to a medical problem. The clove and willow bark remedies show generations of careful trial and observation landing on compounds that modern pharmacology later validated completely. Ancient humans were not passively suffering. They were running a slow, brutal, multi-thousand-year experiment in pain management, using the only laboratory available to them, which was other human beings in agony. And they were getting real results long before they understood why any of it worked. What they lacked wasn't ingenuity. It was speed. A discovery that spreads globally in a week today, through a research paper or a video like this one, took centuries to travel from one river valley to another. Every culture had to rediscover, mostly from scratch, that certain plants numbed pain, that pressure needed releasing, that some substances could seal a crack. The knowledge was real. The bottleneck was distance and time, not intelligence. And this connects to something closer to home than you might expect. Modern dental anxiety, the specific dread so many people feel walking into a dentist's office, is not irrational. It is, in a strange way, an inherited memory. For nearly the entire span of human existence, a trip to have a tooth problem addressed genuinely meant pain, often severe, often without meaningful relief. Anesthesia in dentistry is barely a century and a half old. Before that, every single person in every civilization you have ever read about faced the drill, the extraction, the filling, fully conscious. The fear you might feel in a waiting room today is a faint echo of a reality your ancestors lived through directly, generation after generation, tooth after tooth. So the next time a dentist numbs your gum before doing anything at all, and you barely feel the injection, consider what that tiny moment of comfort actually represents. It represents thousands of years of people chewing bark, packing wax into cracks, drilling holes with bow drills, and burning smoke against imaginary worms, all searching for exactly what you are about to receive without even thinking about it. Your tooth is quiet now, hopefully. But somewhere behind that silence is an unbroken chain of human beings who refused to just sit with the pain, and who, one desperate experiment at a time, figured out how to fight back.